On the evening of October 29th, 1945, 15 people fainted at a lecture in Paris. The crowd outside had swollen into a crush. People elbowed each other for seats. The packed hall turned into an oven, and the press coverage afterward read like a riot report. Heat, fainting spells, police. It wasn't a concert. It was a philosophy lecture. Paris had only just come out of the war, and the people who had lived through it packed that room, past the point of safety, to hear one question answered. Does this life mean anything? Not as an exam question, as a survival question, the kind you ask after the worst has happened and you're still here. If you've ever had the quieter version of that night, everyone else seems to know their path, and you still can't say what you want, then tonight is for you, and I hope you'll stay. The answer that came out of that overheated room hasn't expired, and by the end, I'd like to hand you one small tool you can use before you fall asleep tonight. We were taught that meaning is something you find. Our language gives it away. Find your passion, find your purpose, find yourself. There's an entire travel industry built on that last one. The answer given in Paris that night points the other way. Meaning isn't found, it's made. Not a treasure waiting somewhere to be dug up, but something shaped, choice by choice, the way a work of art gets made rather than discovered. Tonight, I want to show you why that answer came out of a room that desperate, and then what happened 70 years later, when psychology went looking across 132 countries and came back with a result almost nobody expected. The man at the podium was Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher whose name that autumn was all over Paris. The name, not the face. The story goes that the crowd parted for celebrities, while Sartre himself got shoved around in the crush, unrecognized, outside his own lecture. The example he opened with was a paper knife, the little blade you use to slit envelopes. A paper knife's identity is settled before it exists. An artisan thinks of its use first, knows how to make it first, and only then does the thing appear on the workbench. Its purpose comes before its existence. Every manufactured object in the world works that way. Chairs, bridges, phones. If it was made, its reason for existing was decided by someone else, somewhere upstream, before it ever showed up. Then he asked the room to consider the one thing that doesn't. Human beings, Sartre said, run in the opposite order. We appear in the world first, meet ourselves, and only afterwards define what we are. His formula for it reverses the order. Existence precedes essence. There is no blueprint folded inside us at birth, no purpose stamped on us in advance. Nobody consulted a design document when you arrived. You arrived, and the design is still being written, which led him to what he called the first principle of his whole philosophy. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Said quickly, it can sound like a poster in a gym. What gives it weight is a story Sartre told about one of his own students. During the German occupation of France, a young man came to him with a choice. His older brother had been killed in the German offensive of 1940. His father had drifted toward collaborating with the occupiers and left his mother. She had exactly one consolation left in the world, this son. Now he could cross to England and join the Free French forces, a path that answered his brother's death, aimed at a whole nation and utterly uncertain. Or he could stay with his mother, concrete, immediate, and aimed at exactly one person. No ethics textbook settles that. Every rule he consulted spoke with two voices at once. And Sartre's answer to him has been argued about for 80 years. You are free, therefore choose, that is to say, invent. No rule of general morality, he told the young man, can show you what you ought to do. You can hear how cold that sounds. He came for an answer and was told there isn't one. But if you turn it over once, it's something else. It's a promotion. The authority to decide what your life means belongs to no God, no textbook, no generation, only to you. Sartre had a phrase for how that authority feels from the inside, condemned to be free. Nobody asks to be born, and yet from the moment we're thrown into the world, Everything we do is ours to answer for. Freedom, the way he said it, was a sentence, the kind a judge hands down. For a long time, you could take all that or leave it. It was philosophy. Then, 70 years later, the data arrived. In 2014, two psychologists, Samantha Heinzelman and Laura King, published a review in the American Psychological Association's flagship journal. Their question was almost embarrassingly simple. How meaningful do people actually find their lives? Not in theory, in surveys, in numbers, across decades of research. They gathered the large national studies and the questionnaires designed to measure meaning, and they added it all up. It was the kind of question philosophy had debated for centuries, and psychology could finally put a number on. One number stands out. Gallup, the polling company, had asked people in 132 countries whether their lives had an important purpose or meaning. On average, 91% said yes. In Cuba, in Kosovo, in Sierra Leone, places you would forgive for answering differently, the numbers barely moved. And in study after study that scores meaning on a questionnaire, the averages sat consistently above the midpoint of the scale. The paper's title states the conclusion with a shrug. Life is pretty meaningful. Here's why that lands as a reversal. We picture meaning as a rare trophy. The calling found, the vocation discovered, the life that earns a memoir. The picture in the data is the opposite. Meaning isn't scarce, it's common, one of the most widely reported experiences in the data. And where do people say they feel it? Nowhere grand, ordinary routines, the people close by. A day that was simply fine, coffee at the same hour, a phone call that ends warmly. The unglamorous machinery of a life that works. Meaning kept showing up not where people were searching, but where they were living. One more detail, and it's the quiet punchline. Psychology measures having meaning and searching for meaning as two separate things, and the two move separately. You can hold a great deal of meaning without ever searching, and search restlessly while holding plenty. More time spent searching doesn't automatically add up to more meaning held. Put back into Sartre's language, you might read the whole picture this way. Meaning behaves less like something you locate and more like something you produce. Two objections deserve a fair hearing before this turns into a slogan. First, so does just any choice count? No. Sartre's invent was never a permission slip. If nothing above you decides what your life means, then the full weight of the decision lands on you, which is exactly why his word for freedom was condemned. Invention, in his hands, was the heaviest word available, not the lightest. An artist signing a canvas can't blame the paint. That is roughly the position Sartre put us in. Makers, with our names on the work whether we like it or not. Second, is all that searching wasted time then? Also no. The student brought his dilemma to Sartre, and the agonizing was already part of the choosing. The problem was never deliberation. It's the parked search, the kind that goes on for years without ever turning into one made choice. The search is allowed to end. That was the whole point of invent. And the 91% is worth reading as comfort, not as pressure. The bar for a meaningful life sits far lower than we imagine. If you got dinner on the table tonight and asked how somebody's day went, you're living the kind of day that 91% is made of. Not because your standards are low, because the thing itself was never as rare as the rhetoric around it. So here's the small tool I promised. The question usually shows up late, usually in the dark. What is the meaning of my life? The next time it arrives, you might try trading it for a different question and writing the answer down. What did I choose today? It doesn't need to be grand, letting an irritation pass instead of feeding it, sending the message that kept a friendship from going quiet, doing for one more day, the thing you've been tempted to quit. All of it goes on the list. 3 lines is a good night. 1 line still counts. And that list is the day's worth of meaning you made. The paper knife came with a blueprint drawn before it existed. You come with this list instead, a blueprint that gets 1 line longer every night, written by the only hand with the authority to write it. Back, one last time, to that room in 1945. 15 people fainted, and the survivors of a war stood in the heat to receive an answer. What they were handed was not a treasure map. It was the news that there is no map, and that the pen had been in their hands the whole time. So on the night the old thought returns, everyone else knows their path and I don't, it might be worth doubting the sentence itself. Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're mid-draft. And a draft, unlike a map, doesn't need to know its ending to be worth continuing. Sartre gave that room the line it had come for. There is no sense in life ahead of time. Life is nothing until it is lived. But it is yours to make sense of, and the value of it is nothing else but the sense that you choose. Thank you for keeping me company this far.
Don't ask what your life means. I chased that one for years too. But today, just one thing. What did I choose today? A city just out of the war. People crushed into a lecture hall, shoving for a seat at a top just to hear, does any of this